And I call Senator Singh.
And this is an important MPI, an MPI that is where the government does attempt to wind back Labor's financial advice reforms that give protection to consumers against dodgy financial advice reforms that were to come into effect on the 1st of July this year, and in doing a number of things would have banned commissions in any form and would have required financial planners to write to each client telling them of how much money is being silently removed from their accounts to pay ongoing commissions, among many other things. Now, on Thursday last week, Senator Faulkner asked the Acting Assistant Treasurer, Senator Cormann, a question without notice, asked him to come clean on his opaque actions with regard to the tabling of the Corporations Amendment Streamlining Future Financial Advice Regulation 2014, and whether the Treasury had issued specific instructions to delay the tabling of them. Such a delay might be used to frustrate scrutiny of the regulations, the subject of much controversy, and be considered an attempt to avoid the exercise of the Senate's power to disallow those regulations. Now, Senator Cormann was unable to provide any justification for such a delay or any explanation why the FOFA regulations were tabled on to the Senate Table Office on the 1st of July, ready for tabling on the 7th of July, the next sitting day, but then, subject to requests from the Treasury, were not tabled. There was no justification in the answer to Senator Faulkner's question by Senator Cormann of delaying the tabling of these regulations. Now, in this case, we saw Labor Senator Dastyari, himself able to table these regulations with the support of the Senate and thus ensure that they could be properly considered, despite the Coalition trying for days to avoid such Senate scrutiny. Now, the opposition is not alone in seeking to hold the government to account for the errors and the bad policy in its FOFA reforms. FOFA reforms which, as outlined in this MPI moved by Senator Moore today, outline clearly the dodgy practices which will be able to go on if these reforms were to come into effect. Now, Labor is not alone at all. In fact, Labor is joined by a huge sway of civil society which represents consumers, which represents seniors such as the National Seniors, representing some 200,000 seniors or more across the country, who have called on the Parliament to disallow the government's regulations. And if I can quote National Senior Chief Executive Michael O'Neill, who says, "These regulations wind back vital consumer protections introduced after corporate collapses left thousands of elderly Australians destitute." Now, why would a government want to, in light of what Michael O'Neill has stated there, why would a government want to introduce regulations that do exactly that wind back those regulations that ensure that those consumers, those seniors, will be protected from dodgy financial advice? But Michael O'Neill is not the only one joining with Labor in opposing the government's dodgy FOFA reforms. That they include the consumer affairs watchdog Choice, which has also come out opposing these provisions. And I quote from a media release on the 20th of June where Choice called on all federal politicians to oppose the regulations that will wind back these essential protections for consumers seeking financial advice. Chief Executive Alan Kirkland from Choice said, "Conflicted and poor financial advice has cost consumers billions and in too many cases led to people losing their homes and their life savings. This is why consumer protections were originally needed and exactly why they should not be removed." And this is why Labor acted. And this is why on the 1st of July, the landscape in relation to financial advice would have and should have changed. but through the attempts by this government, we are now left in this situation, and the government is left in an embarrassing situation of us debating this MPI today to put on record clearly how backward the government's proposals are. Proposals which, as Choice, and now I've also added to that, National Seniors have outlined, take this country backwards. Now, Labor's reforms, I want to make very clear, were introduced, as I've just outlined from Choice, in the wake of the Storm financial collapses and other collapses and the subsequent parliamentary inquiry into financial advice products and services. They were the most significant reforms in financial services for a generation and included several measures designed to protect investors and help the industry professionalise. Now, that parliamentary inquiry went to great lengths to come forward with recommendations, and what came out of that is the significant reforms adopted by Labor, which included best interest duty, requiring advisors to act in their clients' best interest. Opt-in, requiring advisors to get their clients to opt in, receiving ongoing services every 2 years. Annual disclosure, statements to be sent to clients annually disclosing fees and details of services performed. Conflicted remuneration, a ban on conflicted remuneration, such as commissions paid to financial product providers and to financial advisors. So the whole basis for introducing the FOFA reforms was to restore faith in a sector rocked by high-profile collapse, a poor culture of product sales over advice, and now with some $1.8 trillion of savings, ensure that Australians are getting advice and services that is in their best interests. And during the reform process, over many years, there was extensive and intensive industry and public consultation that clearly identified a path to achieve growth, protect consumers, importantly, and restore trust. By changing that culture over the past 20 years, by lifting standards and professionalising, and by acting, I think most importantly, in the client's best interests. Now, then we have the government's changes announced to the FOFA reforms, which basically did the opposite, and that is why they have been opposed so strongly by consumer groups and by seniors groups. And what do? They remove the essential catch-all provisions in best interests, which adds a loophole for advisors that means best interests will become ineffective. They scrap the opt-in, allowing advisors to continue to charge fees. The annual disclosure, amend this so that advisors only have to provide annual disclosure to clients who commence with them after the 1st of July. Lift the ban on conflicted remuneration. The ban on conflicted remuneration will only apply to commissions on general advice, and other forms of conflicted remuneration will be allowed, including as part of a balanced scorecard approach for both general and personal advice. All the government's words and comments on their changes to FOFA are all about certainty for the sector, perhaps, but not for the consumer. They are certainly weighted in the wrong direction. The Minister says that people who are opposed to their changes are vested interests with political motivations. Well, is the Minister saying that the National Seniors, the Council of the Ageing, Choice, and I think even Alan Jones are part of some sort of vested interest, political conspiracy? I mean, the government makes much of the fact that they are banning commissions, but commissions were already banned. They were banned by Labor. Then this is nothing but a stunt to carry on about banning commissions. Senator Cormann told the Financial Review that at no point has the government sought to reintroduce commissions or conflicted remuneration for financial advisors. Well, a simple glance at page 28 of the explanatory memorandum of the bill proves that reducing conflicted remuneration is exactly what the government has sought to do. So by getting rid of the opt-in provision, the insidious practice of charging fees without people's consent or even knowledge is back on to reduce their life savings.
Thank
and that
you, Senator
is
Singh, but
immoral.
your time has expired.